It was a Thursday night when I first felt it, the knot in my stomach. I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone, while Stephanie was getting ready for her business trip. We've been married for 7 years, and I always figured our relationship was solid. Sure, we had our disagreements, but what couple doesn't? It wasn't anything major, and I trusted her completely. But that night something felt off. She was packing quickly, tossing clothes into her suitcase without a word. Normally, we chat about how the trip would go, maybe make some plans for when she returned. But she was different this time. She didn't ask about dinner, didn't mention what time she'd be back, just zipped up her suitcase and said, "I'll be back on Sunday." I said my usual take care, have a good trip, and kissed her goodbye. But there was this weird, subtle feeling that I couldn't shake. The next few days were more of the same. It wasn't so much what she did, but what she didn't do. She didn't text as much as she usually did, and when she did, it was always brief, like she was in a rush. We've always been good about staying in touch, even when we're apart, so this sudden coldness felt wrong. But I couldn't pinpoint why. One night, she FaceTimed me while I was in bed. I was half asleep and she looked different. She was smiling, but her eyes weren't quite right. There was something in her expression that I couldn't put my finger on. She made a joke about me missing her and we laughed, but it didn't feel the same. Something in her tone, too light, too casual, made me feel uneasy. I brushed it off, though. Maybe I was just being paranoid. But the next evening, things really started to get weird. I was out with some friends when I saw something that made my heart skip a beat. My phone buzzed with a message from Stephanie. At least that's who I thought it was. But when I opened it, I realized it wasn't her texting me. The message wasn't meant for me. It was an accidental send. I'll never forget the first line of the message. "Can't wait to see you tonight. You've been on my mind all day." I froze. I stared at the screen for a full minute, trying to make sense of what I was reading. It didn't make sense. Stephanie had never been the type to act distant, to hide anything. So who was she talking to? The feeling in my stomach twisted. Was this a mistake? Did she accidentally send it to the wrong person? But what happened next made it clear that this wasn't just a simple mistake. Couldn't let it go. I kept thinking about the message, about the tone, about the possibility. I decided to look deeper. I didn't want to invade her privacy, but something inside me told me I needed to know. So I did the one thing I never thought I would, checked her phone. I don't even know why I did it, but it felt like the only way to get the truth. I know it's wrong, but at that point my gut was telling me I had to. And that's when I found it. There were messages, lots of them, from someone I didn't recognize. The same type of flirty, intimate exchanges. The words were so obvious now. How had I missed them? There was a string of texts, all clearly meant for someone else, talking about meeting up when she got back, plans to spend some time alone. Things that no wife should be saying to another man. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I wanted to scream, but I just couldn't. I just sat there, staring at her phone, watching the words she sent out into the world, realizing how much of her life I wasn't a part of. And that's when everything hit me. The business trip, the odd behavior, the messages. Stephanie had been hiding something from me, but I couldn't understand why. Why hide this from me? Why make me feel like I was crazy for questioning her? It didn't make sense. Everything I thought I knew about our marriage felt like it was crumbling in my hands. I could feel my mind racing. My heart pounded, my hands were shaking. I didn't know what to do with myself. Should I confront her? Should I just ask her directly about the messages? But I knew if I did, she'd deny everything. She'd make it seem like I was overreacting. And then, it hit me. I wasn't just looking for answers anymore. I was looking for a way to make her feel what I was feeling. The betrayal, the confusion, the heartbreak. I didn't know how yet, but I knew I wouldn't just sit here and let this slide. I had to do something. I had to find out the truth. The next few days felt like a blur. I couldn't focus at work. Every minute, my mind was racing, replaying the messages I'd found on her phone. I kept going over the words in my head, imagining the worst-case scenario, and somehow, I was still hoping it wasn't real. But deep down, I knew. I knew. Saturday evening came, and Stephanie texted me saying she was catching a late flight back. I didn't respond right away. I had a decision to make. Did I confront her now as soon as she got home? Or should I let her think everything was fine? Give her time to come up with whatever lie she was planning? It felt like I was walking in a haze, but I knew one thing. I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. When she walked through the door that night, she looked the same. Her smile was there, the one she always gave me when she came home after being away. But this time, it didn't feel warm. It didn't feel like, "I missed you." It felt like a performance, like she was trying to convince me of something she knew I wouldn't believe. "Hey babe, how was the trip?" I asked, trying to sound casual, trying to keep my voice steady. "Busy, but good. You know how these things go," she said, walking past me into the living room, her suitcase rolling behind her. She was still so carefree, almost giddy, and that's when it hit me. She had no idea I knew. She was still acting like everything was normal. But my heart was sinking because I wasn't normal anymore. I wasn't the same person I'd been just a week ago. "Yeah, I get it," I said, following her into the room. "So, what's up with all the texts?" She stopped in her tracks. For a second, I thought she hadn't heard me. But then she turned around slowly, her smile fading just a little. "What are you talking about?" I took a deep breath, trying to keep my composure, but I could feel the rage bubbling up inside me. "The texts, Steph. The ones with 'can't wait to see you tonight.' The ones where you talk about spending time alone. Who the hell is that?" I stepped closer, watching her face for any sign of guilt. For a moment, she just stood there, staring at me. Her eyes flickered with something, a mix of panic and disbelief. Then she blinked, and in an instant, she was back to her usual self, guarded, defensive. "I don't know what you're talking about. You've got it all wrong." "Don't lie to me," I said, my voice shaking, but I was done with pretending. "I saw the messages, Steph. I saw everything. Don't try to cover it up." She opened her mouth to say something, but nothing came out. For the first time in our marriage, she looked at me like a stranger. Her face had gone pale, and her eyes were wide with that same panic I had seen in the text messages earlier. I didn't mean for you to see that," she said, her voice cracking. "It's not what you think. I didn't want to hurt you." My mind was racing. Hurt me? She had already done that. She had already hurt me, and now she was trying to make it sound like I was the one who was overreacting? I felt a wave of disgust hit me, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Who is he?" I demanded, my voice low and steady despite the storm inside me. There was a long silence. I could see her weighing her options, trying to figure out if she could lie her way out of it, but I wasn't giving her that chance. I wasn't some fool. "Answer me. Who is he?" She finally looked away, eyes dropping to the floor, and I knew I'd caught her in a lie, and the guilt she couldn't hide was the only thing that mattered now. It's a coworker," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "We've been talking, but it wasn't like that. I never meant for things to go this far." I felt my stomach drop. "So you've been lying to me, hiding it, this whole time." Her face twisted with regret, but I could tell she was trying to control the damage, to minimize it. "It wasn't like what you're thinking. I never slept with him. I swear." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You didn't sleep with him? So, what? You've just been texting him about spending time alone and looking forward to seeing him tonight, for fun." The words came out sharper than I meant, but I didn't care. She had no idea what kind of betrayal she'd just confessed to. "I was lonely, okay? I didn't mean for this to happen. I didn't want to hurt you." She looked like she was about to break down, but I wasn't ready to let her off the hook that easily. "You were lonely?" I repeated, incredulous. "You've been lying, sneaking around, and I'm the one you're trying to blame for not being there? That's your excuse." Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. But then I remembered everything. The lies, the messages, the way she'd made me feel like I was crazy. No, I wasn't going to let her manipulate me anymore. I want you out of the house, I said, my voice hard. I don't care where you go, but I need you to leave. Now. She didn't say anything at first. Just stood there, staring at me like she didn't know what to do. The tears streamed down her face, but I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for her anymore. Not after what she'd done. Not after how easily she had lied to my face. Please, she whispered, her voice cracking. Don't do this. Please, let's talk. We can fix this. I'm done talking, I replied, the weight of her betrayal pressing down on me. It's over, Stephanie. Just go. And just like that, she was gone. Couldn't sleep that night. After Stephanie left, the house felt empty. The silence was louder than any argument we'd ever had. I kept replaying everything in my mind. The messages, her confession, the way she tried to make it sound like she was the victim. I didn't know what was worse. The fact that she had lied to me for months, or the fact that she thought I would believe it was just a mistake, or a momentary lapse in judgment. My stomach churned with anger and hurt, but there was this weird numbness, too. Part of me felt like I should be devastated, but I wasn't. I was angry. Angry that she could look me in the eye for years and hide this. Angry that she'd made me question myself, question us. The next few days were a blur. I didn't talk to anyone about it. Not friends, not family. I wasn't ready to explain what had happened. Not yet. I didn't know what to say. I didn't even know what to feel. I couldn't let myself fall apart. I couldn't let her have that power over me. But I also couldn't ignore the question that kept swirling in my mind. Why? Why would she do this to me? Was it because I wasn't enough? Was I too busy, too caught up in my own world to notice she was struggling? And who was this guy? Was he everything I wasn't? Couldn't let myself go there. Not yet. But I had to know more. I had to find out everything, even if it meant sinking lower than I'd ever thought I would. I spent hours on the computer, searching for any trace of him, any connection between Stephanie and this coworker she'd been texting. I found his name, his social media, his LinkedIn profile. The more I looked, the more I realized how much I hadn't known. He was in his early 30s, lived in a nearby town, and had posted pictures from the same business events Stephanie had attended. They were all over each other in some of those photos.
No cham. No hiding.
It hit me like a punch to the gut. She'd been seeing him. Not just texting, not just flirting, seeing him. And here I was, sitting in this empty house, holding the pieces of a shattered life I didn't even recognize anymore. That's when the thought came to me. Not just to confront her again, not just to demand answers, but something more, something bigger. I wanted her to know what it felt like to have the rug pulled out from under her, to feel the sting of betrayal that I was living with. I didn't want revenge for the sake of revenge. I wasn't that kind of person. But I couldn't just let this go either. I had to regain control. I wasn't sure exactly what it would look like yet, but I knew one thing. I was going to make her feel everything I felt. The next week, I found myself sitting in front of a lawyer. It felt like a weird formality, like something you read about in books or see in movies. But here I was, about to take steps toward a divorce I didn't think I'd ever have to consider. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, but I couldn't let myself back down. I couldn't go back to pretending like everything was fine. The lawyer was kind, but he didn't pull any punches. He explained everything. How long it would take, what the financial implications would be, how to protect myself legally. He also mentioned something I hadn't thought about, a prenuptial agreement. We'd signed one early in our marriage, nothing major, just the basics. But the lawyer advised me to make sure it would hold up in court, especially given the circumstances. The next few days were spent gathering documents, securing bank statements, making sure I had everything in place. It wasn't easy. There were moments when I second-guessed myself. When I thought about calling her, telling her I was sorry for what I was doing. But then I'd remember the way she'd lied to me, the way she'd betrayed me without a second thought, and I'd feel that fire build up again. It wasn't just about the money or the house. It wasn't about the fact that she cheated. It was about regaining control. It was about proving that I wouldn't just sit back and be walked all over. I had to do something that would make her realize just how much she had messed up. And then I did it. I called her to let her know we needed to meet. I didn't tell her why, just asked her to come by the house. She agreed, of course. She didn't think I was serious about the divorce. She thought I was still the same guy who would just forgive her. When she arrived, I told her we needed to talk. I could see the hesitation in her eyes, but she sat down, crossing her arms like she always did when she was preparing for a fight. "I'm not going to waste your time, Stephanie," I said, my voice steady. "I've got everything in place. The lawyer, the papers. The divorce is happening." Her eyes widened, and for the first time since all of this started, I saw fear in her eyes. You're serious?" "I am. But that's not the worst part." I paused, watching her face change. "You see, you've already betrayed me, but I'm not going to let you walk away with everything. I've made sure I'll be fine financially. I'm taking the house, the car, and I'm making sure you know that every choice you've made has consequences." She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. I couldn't help the small, almost cruel smirk that curled at the corners of my lips. "This isn't just about us anymore," I continued. "This is about you understanding that there's a price to pay for everything. You'll never get to forget what you've done. You'll never get to act like this was just some small mistake." And with that, I signed the papers. I didn't wait for her to say anything else. The door was open and she had to leave. It's been a few months now. The divorce was finalized without much drama. She tried to fight for some of the assets, but I made sure everything was handled. She's moved out, and I've taken steps to rebuild my life, piece by piece. I'll admit, the revenge wasn't as sweet as I thought it would be. In the end, it didn't change the fact that I still loved her, even after everything. But sometimes you have to make hard decisions to protect yourself. I've learned that the hard way. Looking back, I don't regret the choice I made. I don't regret standing up for myself. But I do wish things had turned out differently. I wish I hadn't had to walk away from the person I thought I was going to grow old with. But now I'm moving on, slowly but surely, and I've learned to trust myself again. And that, at the end of the day, is worth more than any revenge could ever be.